I'm Cassie Clark. Welcome to Where the Dogwood Blooms. Today I'm here at the Mill Prong House and we're going to meet somebody who's going to tell us the history and the stories of this incredible house. Hey there, Blake. Thank you for having us out here.
Well, welcome to Mill Prong. Mill Prong was built by my fifth great-grandfather, John Gilchrist, in 1795. So, welcome to our house.
That's amazing.
He purchased this portion of the land in 1794 from James Lowry's family, who were Native Americans and had operated a tavern during the American Revolution here. And his original home was back at the back of the property near the cemetery, and this house was built for his second wife. So my ancestor lived in the little house. Second wife got the big house. But as you can see, the house has suffered a lot of damage from the hurricanes that we've had here in eastern North Carolina over the past few years, but we're in the process of trying to raise funds and restore it, so the front is actually looking a little bit better now. So let's come on inside.
All right.
One thing you'll notice, if you'll notice the columns on the porch, they are not like lots of columns you see that go all the way down to the porch. You'll see the arches cut, and that's to help the water shed off without rotting out the bottom of the columns.
How cool is that?
So many times with old houses, that's where rot starts, is there at the columns where they're reaching go all the way down to the floor. Yeah, it just blows my mind at times to think that these were carved in 1795. I mean, it just, when you see houses that are built, that just fall apart, they're all built with particle board, chipboard.
I keep telling people to stop building McMansions.
Exactly.
Please stop.
The house is on the National Register. It was actually put on the National Register in 1980 during the time that they were doing the first renovations to restore the house. Like I said, the house was built by John Gilchrist in 1795. He died in 1802, left it to his second wife for her widowhood, then to one son for 4 years, and then to the other son. We're not sure exactly when she moved out, but in a few years later, the son sold his interest to a Mr. Patterson, who then turned around and sold it to the McCarran. So it became the home of Colonel Archibald McCarran and his wife, Effie Sellers. Interesting thing is, Effie Sellers was the niece of John Gilchrist's first wife and was actually named for her. So she came as the mistress of her aunt's plantation. So the house is pretty much like it would have been at the time that John Gilchrist built it. There are some things that changed when the McCarrans bought it in 1834. One thing is, we think that's when the mantles were done. If you notice, the mantle here is just a beautiful carved mantle. And it's identical to one that was in the Shaw House in Lowry, which is now at the Rockefeller Center at Williamsburg. The house was dismantled and they took that one room, and you'll see in one of the other rooms pictures of that. The McCarrans lived here until the late 1890s, when they moved into Red Springs to give the girls a better chance of education, because Floral McDonald College was there. So at that time, the mantles were taken out and put in their new home in Red Springs, and then they were brought back here when the renovation was done in the 1990s. There are a few things here in the house that are original to the time of the McCarrans. This sideboard is one that would have been used by the family, by the McCarrans here in the house, and was later taken, like I said, with a lot of the other stuff into Red Springs, but it has wine drawers in it. This chest, the second McCarran lived here, D.P. McCarran. He married Sheriff Hector McNeil's daughter from Fayetteville, and this chest was part of her dowry that she brought from her family's plantation over in Cumberland County.
My husband is actually a descendant.
Oh, of Hector?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then you'll recognize that's Hector and his wife here in the center. And then this is Mary McNeil McCarran.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It is. We just found, she taught at Floral College, which we'll talk about that. Floral College was started in the 1840s by John Gilchrist Jr. Education was very important to the Scots, and you'll see that all over southeastern North Carolina. All the old schools are all founded by Scots. So John Gilchrist Sr. had a tutor that he brought from Scotland to tutor his children, so they would have grown up learning Gaelic here in the colonies. And then John Gilchrist Jr. was the first graduate from Robinson County of UNC. And then he went back 2 years later and got his master's. So he had his undergraduate and master's, became an attorney, and did not like the law, or rather didn't like the lawyers. He said that if he had to deal with such despicable people, he would just go home to his farm, which is exactly what he did. He quit law practice, went back home to the plantation, and that's when he came up with the idea of starting Floral College, which was the first college to confer degrees to women in North Carolina. There were older schools like Salem College, which was Salem Academy then, was a little bit older than that, but they did not actually confer degrees. So they were very rigorous at Floral College about education. It wasn't just a finishing school where you really needlework and learning to write good letters. You know, they were very, very intense education classes. So Mary McNeil actually taught. She'd gone to school at Floral College, and then she actually taught there. And one of the descendants has just given me a bundle of letters that were written to her by her students at Floral College. Another thing we had that same descendant gave us as they were going through family stuff was a bundle of postcards from 1908. And they're from all over the world. And what it was is in 1907 was the 300th anniversary of the founding of Jamestown. At the end of that year, which was a huge celebration, President Roosevelt sent out the Great White Fleet, which was all the major ships for the Navy, went and did a year-round cruise around the world. And this this sailor, had been a friend of Mrs. McCarran's growing up. And so he wrote her from every port where they landed all the way around.
That is
world.
so sweet.
So we're in the process, and we're going to do something interesting with those. We're not sure exactly what we're going to do, so I'm going through and organizing those. And then after he got back, he came here and stayed with her at Mill Prong for a while for a visit. So lots of interesting things that, you know, there's just so much history connected with the house and the families. So that chest, this piano was original to the house. The family were afraid of what would happen when Sherman's troops came through, because they had heard about the burning of Atlanta and the South, the fiery march of Sherman to the coast. So they wrapped this in oilcloth and buried it. Sherman's troops found it, because by the time they got to this area of North Carolina, they knew all the hiding places that people hid stuff, because people would hide their silver and things. So they found it, uncovered it, and actually stomped in the lid of it. So the lid was never restored. The piano did play for a while longer, but then it spent 100 years over on the farm of D.P. McCarran's brother's family, and they just donated it back in the late 1990s. Then, let's see. Go over here to the dining room. And originally, this staircase would have actually come down into this room, and you would have accessed got to the second floor through that staircase. But in the 1834 renovation, when the McCarrans bought it, they turned the staircase so that it opened out onto the back porch there, which had become a trend because of homes burning. The staircase came into the center of the house, and the house was on fire, then you were trapped lots of times. So this would allow you to be able to get out easier from the fire. This is the other carved mantle that was done at the same time as in the 1834 renovation. Not nearly as elaborate as the parlor one, but still a beautiful mantle. And you'll notice boarded up behind there, when the hurricanes came through, we lost the chimney on that side of the house. So we're in the process of trying to raise funds to restore that. They're restoring currently, and you can actually see today when you're here, they're working on the existing chimney. This chest would have belonged to one of Colonel McCarran's granddaughters. It was donated back to us during the renovation in the 1990s. An old dough bowl and a blanket chest, a big huge blanket chest for all those quilts that the women spent time quilting. You will notice, let's go back in here just a second. I should have talked to you about this now. You'll notice the wainscoting in here and the panel and the doors. And they look like they're very expensive. They look like they're mahogany, and but they're not. They're actually all faux painting, which was the thing to do in the South at that time, was to take regular pine and actually make it look like this elaborate wood.
That's beautiful.
And actually, it showed sometimes more refinement, I think, than the actual putting the regular wood. Because you could get the regular wood from anywhere, but to get an artist that would come in and actually spend time creating the look, I think it's much better. And you'll be surprised the colors when we get upstairs. You see the sort of a mustard color here. We think of homes being boring colors, everything being white. That was not the case in the colonial America. So you'll see that when we get upstairs to the master bedroom, the color planes that we have up there. So this is an outside door, and when the McCarrans were here, they had actually built a side porch at some time during their stay here. And this is the back room. This is sort of what I've always called the office. I don't know that they used it as an office, but to me it made sense because it had an outside entrance. And to me it just made sense that was, where the overseer would come and talk to the Gilchrist and McCarrans. If you look over here, you'll see this picture that I was talking about. This is the room that's out of the Shaw House that's up in Williamsburg. And if you look, you can tell that mantle is the exact same mantle that we have in the parlor. But you'll notice that not only do they have the panel, the wainscoting painted, but they've got this scroll work, like swags up across the top that are painted. So it was a very, very elaborately painted room.
Wow.
And then the drawing at the top was done by one of the descendants, Judith Thompson of Mill Prong.
Wow.
And here you'll see the two pictures at the top. One shows they actually show that porch, but these would have been taken probably in the 40s, I would say. And then the ones on the bottom would have been the late 90s after the initial restoration was done. These chairs would have been original to the house. This one was a Curry chair that we think was probably purchased at his estate sale.
Oh, wow.
In the 1830s. And this is what was called the traveler's room. The stagecoach came by the plantation and would have stopped here to trade horses, sometimes to rest overnight. So this was a room that they would have come and gone in without the Gilchrist and the McCarrans even knowing that they were here at times. So it was just worked out that this is where they would come and stay.
It's a really tiny room.
It is, but you have to realize, well, one, that people are a lot shorter than they are now, but the whole idea of privacy was not something that was taken into account then. So you would have had a house, say a cabin, the size of the parlor here that a normal family would have lived in, and 5, 10, 15 people might have been living in a space that small.
Right. So is this bed original?
That bed I don't think is original to the house, but it dates back to that time period. So you would have had 3 or 4 people sleeping there. You would have had a pallet where people would have slept on. You know, the whole idea of privacy and, you know, a guest room is not something that would have been at that time. You know, if it was warm weather, they actually probably would have slept out here on just a bedroll. You know, so the thought that when we travel and how luxurious things are for us now when we travel, that wasn't the case back then.
Right.
Originally, this would have been one room, and then this would have all been open where the staircase and the other bedroom is. And this would have been the master bedroom. And here you see the colors that I was talking about. Bright blue, the mustard yellow, the wainscoting painted to look like very expensive wood.
I love this room.
This, we used to call this Miss Julia's room. Although it was probably the master bedroom, it's always what we referred to as Miss Julia's room, who died of fever during the Civil War. But the furniture that's in here was donated back maybe about 12 years ago by the Thompson family, who one of the great-granddaughters had the furnishings at her house. The 2 portraits are Colonel Archibald McCarran and then his wife, Effie Sellers McCarran, who was named, like I said earlier, for John Gilchrist's first wife. It was Effie McMillan.
Furniture's beautiful.
Yes.
Ooh, so tell me about this.
Which one?
Right here.
That would have been a fireplace insert. That would have been a coal burning versus wood. And they probably used that here in the house in the late 1890s when coal would have been a very big thing here at that time. And you'll see here what I was talking about with education. So there would have been a school here when John Gilchrist's children were growing up. But then Colonel McCarran also operated a school here. And these are some of the accounts where people would pay him for supplies for the school and things like that for the students who were coming.
Wow. I try to tell people all the time, you know, you hear that women were beat down and very mistreated back then, and yet you hear stories like this and it gives you a whole new perspective.
Yeah, I think people tend to dwell on 1 or 2 sad stories, and not to make light of their cases, but you know, you have like with Floral College, you know, these young girls were learning not only to be socialites and to run their families' farms and all, but they were just learning great amounts, geography, philosophy. I mean, they were doing trigonometry. I mean,
that's amazing.
I know. I don't even want to think about trigonometry myself now, but you know, to look back at the school books from the 1840s and 1850s versus what we teach now is, you know, it's not a fraction of what they were learning.
Yeah.
So this room would have, after the 1834 renovation, would have been walled off and made into a separate room. This would have been just an open space. And this room sort of showcases Floral College. So these are some of the letters from girls who were at Floral College. We're very lucky that the Turner's girls' letters, who were Cumberland County residents that went to Floral College in the 1840s, are preserved at Chapel Hill. So I actually do a program on the history of Floral College. I go out and lecture, and it's all told from the girls' point of view. So it's called Girls Will Be Girls, and it's the same things that girls write home, or I guess text home now. Yeah, oh, I need more money. I need some clothes. Yeah, I've got a set of letters by a girl in Hamer, South Carolina, and she writes 4 letters to her father, and everyone is sending more money. And are my dresses ready for graduation? They've got to be here by such and such a date because I've got to have them. Yeah. So one thing the Turner girls talk about is how full Stewart's Hall is, and this is Stewart's Hall that was at Floral College. It's the only building left now, and it's the education building for the Presbyterian Church, Center Presbyterian Church, which is where Floral College was, on the corner of that property. But they write about how full their room was. They had like 8 people staying in their room already, and then there were 2 other girls who came, and they're like, "Can you let them stay here too?" So the thought of a room probably this size, maybe even smaller, had 8 girls living in it, and then they wanted to add 2 more. But she writes to her father about the fact that they had all gotten their ears pierced. So this was like 1847. They had all gotten their ears pierced, and she's like, "Sister had to have one of hers jabbed 3 times, but it's not any worse than the one that was done once." And then she's like, "And have mother, when she comes the next time, to bring me the earrings that she always wore before she had grandmother's put in." So, it's just their interesting letter. She writes to her brother about how lonely she is there and how she wishes she was back home walking in their flower garden and eating some of her mother's good eats, as she calls them. And she tells him, she says, "I'm ready to go home. Haven't I been here too long? I've been here 3 years. Oh, home, sweet home." So it just gives you a whole look at what life was in the 1840s for these girls who were going to school. But it's technically the exact same things you hear from college students now.
So I see the Bellamy Mansion up here,
Yes.
and I have some very deep roots in Wilmington. Can you tell me about the connection there?
The Bellamy's rented Floral College when it closed down for the Civil War. He rented the house, thinking that they would be safe from Union troops. Of course, that was not the case, because 20,000 Sherman's troops marched right by Floral College and raided it. Took what they could take from the Bellamy storehouse there. Things they couldn't take, like they pulled the plugs out of the wine barrels and saw the wine go. Mrs. Bellamy had hidden her sterling silver dinner forks in her hose, and actually the tines pricked her legs, and she had like sores for her legs. But her daughter, Ellen Douglas Bellamy, wrote a book in the 1930s as her answer to Gone with the Wind. So she writes about their time at Floral College and living there, and the fact of Sherman's troops coming through, and like there was a widow woman who lived nearby, and she looked, and one of the Union officers was on her husband's horse, and her husband had just died in Virginia, and they had brought his horse back to her, and she was like, "Leave me my horse," and they're like, "No, kiss me and you can have your horse." And I can't remember the officer's name right now, but she, of course, refused, and so he took off with her horse. He later ran for office on the Democratic ticket for vice president, and Ellen Bellamy talks about her father would not vote for him. It was the first time he didn't vote for every Democrat, so he wouldn't vote for this guy because of how he treated the widow woman. But Floral College has just a magnificent history. You can see this is a picture of the buildings. And later, after it closed in the 1870s, it became a public school for a while. So in the 1834 renovation that the McCarrans did, they added on these 2 rooms in the back, these 2 shed rooms in the back. So one set up with tartans of all the families that are connected with Mill Prong. And then this is John Gilchrist, Jr., the one who founded Floral College. And this is an exhibit about his anti-secessional sentiments during the war. And here, you'll see this house here. That is the Allen Lowry house, or sometimes referred to as the Henry Berry Lowry house. And Henry Berry Lowry would have been the great grandson of the Lowrys who owned this property that John Gilchrist bought it from, that had the revolution during the tavern during the Revolutionary War. But he's got a whole interesting story. Sometime maybe we can get into that. But he is sort of called the Indian Robin Hood. His uh, father and brother were accused of hoarding guns and stealing hams, and the Home Guard came in, did a trial right there, sentenced them, and murdered them right there at their house. And Henry Berry was a young man at the time and was over in the woods, and he knew that there was no use in trying to come out and stop what was going to happen, because if so, he'd get killed. But he vowed to take his revenge on all of the members of the Home Guard. So that began what in Robeson County is called the Lowry War, and it was a, it came about not only because of that murder, but the Confederates were gathering up, renting slaves from the plantation owners here to go down to Fort Fisher and work, but they were dying off, so people were losing their property, so they started gathering up young Native Americans and taking down there to work in those conditions, and it was horrible. There was malaria running rampant down there, so they would run away and come back to Robeson County and then be gathered up again and taken back. So the Henry Berry Lowry War sort of takes into account not only the fact that his brother and father were murdered, but fighting the Home Guard because of their kidnapping of the Native Americans. But Henry Berry Lowry actually had the largest bounty on his head of anybody at that time. $20,000 in the 1870s was the bounty on his head, dead or alive. He disappears, and there's lots of questions about, there was talk that he accidentally shot himself and that his members of his gang hid his body. But a lot of talking sort of has more likely that he left because he felt that he was endangering his family by being here. So, because there are accounts later on of this man coming back and forth, and his wife would leave for long periods of time. So, the Native American story here at Mill Prong is deep, like I said, because of James Lowry and owning the tavern here. His
So the Lowrys are of the Lumbee tribe, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
currently called the Lumbees. But his son was actually wounded during the American Revolution and actually got a federal pension because of his sword wound during the Revolutionary War. Then later on, they did move from here over towards the Pembroke area, and that's when they sold the land here. But we're actually working on a project as part of the America 250, because we're coming up in 26, it will be the 250th anniversary of the beginning of the American Revolution. So I work at the Museum of Southeast American Indian. So we got a grant through Mill Prong and the museum, and we're doing a symposium on Native Americans during the Revolutionary War in November. And then the second year of the project is actually marking Native American revolutionary sites. So we're working with the Lumbees, the Waccamaw-Siouan, which are in Lake Waccamaw, and the Gohiri, which are up in Sampson County. So those three tribes are who we're focusing on. So we'll be placing highway markers and table markers for areas that are important to those tribes during the American Revolution. And you don't think a lot about the Native Americans during the American Revolution. Sort of, you just don't think about it. You think, well, they were just here, but they weren't. They were fighting alongside those wanting freedom because they had not been treated well by the British, just like the American colonists had not. You do have some, though, that are fighting on the side of the British, So, just like you have Scottish families that were split on both sides of the American Revolution, you have these Native Americans on both sides of the American Revolution. So it's really interesting to unpack their tales of the American Revolution. So that's what this whole grant that we're doing now is about.
That's amazing.
Now I'll let you peek your head in at this other room. This is sort of our working archives. Our goal is I want to redo it as one of the daughters' rooms, because we have part of all that stuff that was found recently by the family was an autograph book, because the girls would have these autograph books that they would have their friends sign, or if they were in college, all their college people, sort of like we did yearbooks, when we were young. But so I want to sort of tell her story, one of the granddaughter's stories, through her autograph book.
That's amazing.
And we have a couple of autograph books survived from Floral College also.
Now, one of the daughters would have probably stayed in this room, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
And this picture, I love this picture down here. This is all dyed cotton balls, made to look like flowers.
How old is it? Do you know?
I would imagine it's probably 1870s would be my thought. It could be older than that, but I'm thinking probably the 1870s. And this shows a look at Mill Prong, a map of the property. So what's in green is actually what's currently owned by the family, but you can see it was a tremendous amount of land owned by John Gilchrist Sr.
Wow.
So here's Mill Prong, and then back here at the back is the cemeteries. And John's original house would have been in this area. We're in the process of, I'm doing a year-long study of how to tell the whole story of Mill Prong. So, of course, since we opened up in the 1990s, we've told the story of the white settlers here. So we're in the process of bringing in the Native American voice for the people who were here before the Scots got here. As a matter of fact, this past year, my boss, Nancy Chavis, was our speaker, and she spoke all about the Native experience and what it would have been like here before the Scots, before Gilchrist bought the property. But then we're also looking on how to tell the story of the enslaved people who were here on the farm. And this is a listing of the slaves that were born here when the McCarrans were here. But so we'll be redoing exhibits and focusing on trying to tell the stories. One of the projects that we're doing right now is the African American Cemetery, trying to research and find out some of the names of people who are buried there that tombstones don't exist, because used to only very, very rich people had tombstones. Everybody else had wooden slabs with their names engraved on them, and that was it. So those don't exist anymore. So we're working with trying to find descendants of those families that were here. In the African American Cemetery, there are probably actually some graves in there that date like from the 50s. So they continue to bury people in that area.
Oh, wow.
So this is our annex, and this is probably about the location that the original kitchen would have been for the house. These kitchens were not in the main houses because of the fear of fire. So this serves as, we have a little kitchen in it for when we have events, like at Christmas, the first Sunday of every December we have Christmas open house, and we fix recipes from our cookbook. So we bring out the old cookbook and we do recipes from the cookbook for the Christmas open house. So we have a kitchen here, and then it's also our gift shop for our books and things like that.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right, so tell me about the tree.
the tree is what's called an Indian marker tree, and they would have been bent like that by the Native Americans to point on a trail, so people could follow the trail and know where to go. And then, of course, this indentation you see here is where the archaeology team in the late 90s did some digging out here. We were in partnership when we first opened up with St. Andrews College. Matter of fact, one of the deans lived in the Annex and kept an eye on things. And then the archaeology department would come out here and do digs so that the students would have hands-on. And matter of fact, one of our docents now was a student at St. Andrews and used to do digs out here in the...
Did they find anything?
Lots of stuff, lots of times where they digs are where the privies were. So you find things that people would have thrown away, which would have been broken china, doll heads, broken needles, things like that. So that's the type of stuff they found was home, stuff
Right.
that would have been in homes.
Very cool. Okay, so, and now we're going to go out to the cemetery.
We're going to drive down the farm road and we're going to go back to the two cemeteries.
Okay, very cool. And so what's this little brick building?
Oh, that's just the pump house.
Okay, so that's definitely new.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We really didn't talk about why Mill Prong is called Mill Prong. It's a strange name for a house. But this is a prong or an offshoot of the Ralph Swamp. Is this water here? And at the end of this run of the prong was the McFalls Mill. So that's why it's called Mill Prong, because it's a shoot off of where the mill was. But it's just a beautiful area back here.
Is the mill still here?
The mill is not there. All that's left is a marker that was put up maybe sometime in the 30s or 40s with one of the millstones and a plaque. And then there's a highway marker for it.
This is beautiful. You never think about this area being full of swamps.
Robeson County, I like to tell people, is one big swamp with some high ground. There are 50 swamps in Robeson County, named swamps. So there's like Ralph Swamp, Prancer Swamp, Great Marsh Swamp, Big Marsh Swamp, Little Marsh Swamp. I think there's an alligator swamp, there's a hog swamp. And used to, before there were post offices everywhere, that's how you were actually told people. You say, oh, I live on the Ralph Swamp, or I live on Hog Swamp. And and lots of times that's how your mail would be addressed, Blake Tyner, Hog Swamp. Yeah. And then you would go to the post office to get your mail. So.
That's awesome. Okay, so I have to ask, tell me about your outfit.
This is the McCoy tartan. So my fourth great-grandfather married a Gilchrist descendant. He was a McCoy, Lachlan McCoy. So this is his tartan. And that's also the name that we gave our son. So my son is McCoy, named after his fourth great-grandfather's family.
Oh, that's so sweet.
And then the Scots, I say, had the original fanny packs. This is a sporran, and because kilts have no pockets, so that's where you carry everything. In the past you might have carried, hardtack or something like that, but I've got keys and my cell phone and my wallet. So.
There you go. What about your socks?
Those are called hose, and then you have your flashes that would hold your hose up. And originally, now this kilt is a made kilt, so it's already got all the pleats sewn in. But originally, you would have had a huge piece of tartan that would be about 9 yards. So that's where the phrase, the whole 9 yards, comes from. And you would put your belt on the ground, and you would pleat the bottom of your tartan. You would lay down, pull the belt around you, belt it in place, and then the top would hang. You'd sort of tuck it in. Or if it was cold weather, you brought it up around your shoulders as a blanket, If it was raining, you put it over your head. And then at night, you would undo your belt, and that's what you slept in. That was your blanket.
Wow. Very cool.
So this is the old family cemetery. So you would have Gilchrist family and their descendants here. You've got the McCarrans and their family descendants here. Unfortunately, you'll see damage where people come in and just like to vandalize things. So we have the Purcell sarcophaguses, which have been destroyed. So these sarcophagus, let's see, this one was put in 1846. And I think this was probably about the same time period.
So what did they look like before?
They would have been up, like these were the capstones that would have been at each end. They would have been up probably on pillars, some type of pillar.
Is there any way to restore these?
Yeah, but as with everything else, it takes a lot of money.
Right.
So I'm hoping maybe a Purcell descendant will want to come in and pay to redo them, to fix them up. Yeah, but like with everything else here, everything requires money. Yeah. So we have to focus on the house first, but then you'll see over here there have been a couple that have been tumbled down that were tile monuments. But I think I mentioned that there are people probably buried in this side, which was the owner's cemetery, and on the African American cemetery they don't have any markers because they would have been wooden markers. Now, these are McLean's, but the Gilchrist markers are over here. But you'll see these are just beautiful tombstones.
They are so pretty. 1832.
And lots of people, they talk about, people had short lifespans. Well, like this one was 80 years old when she died. So I think sometimes we get pigeonholed into, thinking that because a few people died young, and there were lots of people who died young, but everybody did. So this is John and Gilchrist and his first wife at these tombstones. But you'll see she did die at 46. He lived until 62.
And this was the first owner, right?
Yes, this was the first owner. So these would have been my 5th great-grandparents. Wow. I think it interesting, it talked about the fact that she had been a member of the Presbyterian Church for 20 years on her tombstone. Talks about him being a member of the legislature and how important education was and travels. So I think it's always interesting to see what people put on their tombstone. And they're like, these would have been ones that probably in the 60s or so, a descendant came in and saw that the stones were broken and then sort of did this concrete thing to preserve them because you see somebody that's still broken. It's just, to me, very peaceful out here.
Yeah.
I've been drawn to cemeteries since I was a child.
You and me both. Everybody has always told me that it's odd. I think that it's, honoring our ancestors. I think that's a good thing.
Exactly.
Floral was a very popular name.
Yes. You'll see where some have been broken over the years and have been repaired. We do have somebody, you'll notice that a lot of these tombstones are really white and really able, you can read them real well, and that's because one of the descendants has come out and done a cleaning on those. There's a special chemical that you can spray on them that will do away with the aging without damaging. Lots of people would, in the past, like put bleach on them and use wire brushes, and those are, very porous and it will damage them. So, right through this little bit of hedgerow, we walk into the African American cemetery. And you see a lot less markers and smaller markers. I think these look like they died in the early 1900s. Like I was saying, lots of markers would have been just carved wooden slabs, which they couldn't stand the test of time.
So this whole area would have been a cemetery.
Yes, yeah. And originally the enslaved people would have been buried here, but then as you can see, it continued long after slavery. That grave that I was just looking at was 1926. So here's another example of one that's broken. This is George Washington McCarran. So he was born in 1821, and he was enslaved to the McCarran family. He stayed here after the Civil War and was the carriage driver for the McCarrans, and died here on the farm in 1906. And his house was across the street, across the road from Mill Prong, just a little bit further on the other side of the stream. But you'll see you'll see names of people that pick up history. So he's named George Washington McCarran. You'll see lots of people called Lafayette after the Marquis de Lafayette, who fought with George Washington during the Revolutionary War.
I actually have a great uncle named Lafayette.
Okay. Lafayette did not actually come here to Mill Prong, but he did come to John Gilchrist's oldest son, Angus. Lived maybe about 3 or 4 miles from here, and he had a tavern there on the river. And Lafayette stopped there on his trip from Fayetteville down to Camden during his 1825 tour of the United States.
You wouldn't even know this was back here.
No. And we've got a guy who is James McBride, that's on our board, who has done a lot of the work to clear it up on this side. You know, people are like, oh, well, why can't you just do it all? Well, it all takes money, and our board is made up mainly of descendants of the McCarran and the Gilchrist family. There are about 10 of us, I think, on the board, 10 or 12. And I'm by far one of the youngest. We have a member who's like 41, but everybody else is like in their 60s and 70s. You know, so, and we're trying to bring more volunteers on board to help with things. Back in the 90s, we had a Friends of the Mill Prong who sort of did all the tours and things like that. But right now, we're open the first Sunday of every month, and a different board member takes each Sunday to be the tour guide. So several of us were here yesterday because the Highland Games were this weekend. So we did a thing where we were opened on Sunday after the Highland Games. And then we also had the Temperance Society, which is maybe about 7 miles from here, open. It's the Richmond Temperance and Literary Society, and it was actually one of the founders was D.P. McCarran, who lived here at Mill Prong.
So when we were driving through, there's all the fields.
Right.
Can you tell me about those?
Well, those are still owned by the Bullock family, who are descendants of the McCarrans. They've got soybeans planted out there. When we were back here in the spring, they had wheat growing. So it was real pretty seeing the wheat waving in the breeze.
So how many generations is that?
Let's see. I'll have to count up. So we have Archibald McCarran, his son D.P. McCarran. They had daughters. So I think that Richard and Tina, who are McCarran descendants, I think that they're the 5th generation of the McCarrans to farm. Wow. I think 5th. Maybe 6th, but I think they're the 5th generation.
I love it.
And their mother and they are the ones who originally who still managed it when Mill Prong Preservation was started in 1978, and they approached the family about leasing the house to that group for them to restore. And then it's like a 10-year restoration period, so to restore the house.
So how can folks get involved to help preserve this? Well, I guess, is it appropriate to still call it a plantation? How do people get involved?
Yeah,
Because there's a lot going on here.
Plantation, lots of people don't use that term. They say farm, but when John Gilchrist wrote his will, he called it plantation. So
Right.
they can go to our Facebook page. They can follow us on Facebook, and they can come to our website. And I know you'll put the links for both of those on your video. So if you're nearby, you can volunteer to come out and help. You can come out, and if you want to do yard work, you can come out and help clean cemeteries. You can come out and be a docent. So because we're always looking for people who are interested to help with the tours monthly. You can write a check. It's the most important thing you can do, and tell your friends to write a check. This year for my birthday, I did a video out here asking for, instead of getting presents, for everybody to donate money towards my thing. So I've said, I've got 1,000 Facebook followers, and if everybody would send me $5, but we did have some that sent. But yeah, you can write a check is probably, or on our website you can do it by PayPal. You don't even have to write a check anymore. But yeah, just there's so many ways you can support it. You can become as involved as you want to be.
So there's history here from Native Americans, from African Americans, and from Scottish Americans.
Right.
I think it's very important to preserve this because it's very diverse.
This is one of the last Scottish homes built by a Scottish immigrant. So you're talking first generation immigrant, John Sr., who built the house. So it's just a very important piece of history.